They say time heals everything, but what if time was the very thing that tore you apart? That's what I kept asking myself as I sat there, staring at that old photograph, trying to piece together what went wrong. It's funny how something so small, something you haven't thought about in years, can suddenly feel like it holds the weight of your entire life. My name is Emily Carter. I'm 32 years old. I work as a freelance editor here in Portland, Oregon. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep the lights on, pay rent, and stay a little ahead of loneliness. But lately, it feels like even that's slipping. This is the story of how my family shattered my past, erased my name from our legacy, and forced me to uncover the one secret they never expected me to find. If you've ever felt abandoned by the people who were supposed to love you most, then stay with me. Because this story, it might feel like yours too. It started on one of those dreary Portland afternoons. Rain tapping against the window, gray light dripping through the glass like sadness itself. I was curled up on my faded blue couch, a secondhand throw blanket wrapped around my legs, clutching a photo I hadn't looked at in years. It was me and Grandma Margaret, I must have been 8, standing in front of her old Victorian house in the small town of Ashbury. She had her arm around me, and I was grinning, missing a front tooth. Behind us, the house towered like a piece of history. White-painted wood, ivy curling up the porch railing, and those green shutters that always creaked in the wind. God, that place. That house wasn't just a home. It was a memory capsule, a sanctuary. I could still hear her voice sometimes, soft, a little raspy, always with a story to tell. "You know, Em," she'd whisper, as we sat under the grapevine arbor in the backyard, "this house has secrets. Real ones. From the old days, when the world was falling apart and our family held tight to something special." Her eyes would twinkle. "Jewels, letters, documents. They saved us, and I've kept them safe, somewhere only a Carter would know." I never knew if she was serious or just making up bedtime fairy tales, but when you're 8, you believe in magic, and I believed her. I remember chasing fireflies barefoot through the garden, my dress soaked from the sprinklers. I remember helping her pick tomatoes and rinse them in the sink, their earthy scent filling the kitchen. I remember curling up next to her on the porch swing, our hands sticky with peach juice, listening to the creak of the wood and the wind in the trees. That was the last summer I felt whole. The buzz of my phone jolted me out of my thoughts. I glanced down. A text from Sarah, my childhood best friend. "Hey, not sure if you saw, but I just drove by your grandma's house. There's a for sale sign. Wait, actually, it's already sold. Looks like someone moved in. 6 months ago? Thought you'd want to know." My stomach dropped. "Sold?" I blinked, read it again. My hands started trembling. 6 months? I hadn't heard a word. Nothing from Dad, nothing from Mom, not even a courtesy call from Michael, my brother. I stood up too fast. The photo slipped from my lap and landed face down on the floor. For a second, I just stared at it. I couldn't move. That house was mine, not by deed or law, but by memory, by heart, by every piece of me that ever felt safe. They sold it? Without telling me? I picked up the photo, brushing off imaginary dust as if it were a sacred artifact. My chest tightened. Why would they do this? I sat back down, still gripping the photo. Rain tapped harder now, more insistent, almost like a warning. 1,000 thoughts swirled. Did Grandma leave a will? Was I ever part of it? Why didn't they call? Did they think I wouldn't care? That I wouldn't notice? My eyes burned. I whispered to no one. That house was my home. I could still see myself at 8 years old dancing through the garden. Still hear her laugh as she braided my hair. Still feel the warm press of her hand on my back when she'd say, "You're my favorite story, Em. Never forget that." But now, all of it felt like a lie. I reached for my phone. My fingers hovered over my dad's name, then my brother's, then back again. My hands were shaking. I took a breath, deep, uneven, and hit call. As the ringtone echoed, I felt something shift inside me, a wound cracking open. I wasn't just grieving a house, I was mourning the family I thought I had. The line rang 5 times before Dad's voicemail, polite, clicked in. I froze, phone pressed to my ear, hearing only the faint hiss of rain against my apartment window. No message. I didn't trust my voice not to crack. Sleep never found me. I lay on the couch watching headlights smear across the ceiling while Sarah's text blazed in my mind. Sold 6 months ago. Around 3 a.m., I sat up, heart pounding, and whispered, "I'm going to find out why." That single sentence felt like oxygen. By dawn, the storm had thinned to a raw drizzle. I dressed in the dark, black jeans, charcoal sweater, the boots I'd worn to Grandma's funeral, and caught the first MAX train into downtown Portland. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, turning every commuter into a washed-out photograph. My reflection in the glass looked the same, pale, stunned, but sharpening at the edges. Whitaker and Crowley occupied the 7th floor of a sandstone building by the river. Inside, lemon polish and old paper scented the air. A grandfather clock tolled 9:30, each chime a needle in my nerves. The receptionist pulled up my file, eyebrows lifting when she saw the name. "Mr. Conway can see you now, Miss Carter." John Conway, linen suit, salt and pepper hair, ushered me into his book-lined office. He spoke gently, as though I were already grieving. "I need to review my grandmother's will," I said, voice holding steady by sheer force. "Her house in Ashbury was sold without my knowledge." Conway opened a thick file. "Margaret Carter signed a final amendment on July 14, 2022. The property and contents passed to your parents Robert and Linda and your brother Michael." He turned the document toward me. My name was nowhere. Heat bloomed behind my eyes. "She promised that house was mine," I managed. "I'm sorry," he murmured. He slid the pages back, but a yellow sticky note peeled free, initialed J.C., James Carlton, Grandma's previous lawyer before his sudden heart attack. The note read, "Review original 1995 codicil, E.C. primary heir." My pulse lurched. "Is that codicil here?" "Possibly in archive storage," Conway said after a pause. "Carlton's files were never fully cataloged. Give me 48 hours, I'll search." Leaving the office felt like stepping into thinner air. Drizzle speckled my coat as I dialed Dad. He answered on the third ring, brisk, like he'd been expecting trouble. "Emily." "Why didn't anyone tell me the house was sold?" "It was a family decision," he replied, unruffled porcelain clinking in the background. "A decision that erased me?" My voice wavered. "Did you pressure Grandma to change her will?" Silence then. "What's done is done. Let it go." "So you can bury everything?" "I won't." My words shook, but I didn't care. "I'm at work," he snapped. The line went dead. For a moment I stood beneath the awning, rain dripping from the edges, phone still pressed to my ear. Rage and disbelief tangled like wires behind my ribs. I forced myself to breathe, then headed home, each footfall a vow. Back in my kitchen, I opened my laptop and dove into years of archived emails. Carter Estate, James Carlton, codicil. At first, nothing. Then a subject line flared. Important. Don't delete. My hands trembled as I clicked. "Emily, your grandmother entrusted me with a will naming you sole beneficiary of the Ashbury property and historical assets. She planned to sign updated copies during her next visit. If anything prevents this, tell John Conway to locate file MC 1995 EC. Protect yourself. James Carlton." I read it twice, throat raw. Proof. She'd meant the house for me all along. The mug beside my computer rattled as my fist slammed the table. They lied to me. The words escaped, low and shaking, but solid. I printed the email, the sticky note, Sarah's text, Conway's card, pinning each to the corkboard above my desk. Red marker lines turned the board into a crime scene map. Lightning flashed outside, catching my reflection in the window, shoulders squared, eyes blazing. If Grandma hid one truth, there might be more. I grabbed my phone again, thumb hovering over Sarah's name. She'd seen me at my worst and never flinched. But first I needed Conway's call, needed that forgotten codicil like a sword in my hand. I lowered the phone and stared at the board. Between the papers hung a faded Polaroid, 8-year-old me grinning beside Grandma on the Ashbury porch. Her eyes in that photo seemed to gleam now, urging me forward. "I'll find out what they did, whatever it costs," I whispered. Outside, the rain softened, streetlights casting amber halos on the slick pavement. Somewhere down that glowing road waited the next revelation, the next rupture in the story my family tried to rewrite. And when I uncovered it, I vowed they would have to face me and Grandma in the light. Morning filtered in slow and colorless, as though the sky itself was hesitant to see what I would do next. I hadn't slept. only drifted in and out of restless thoughts while the apartment ticked and sighed around me. By 7, the need to move outweighed the ache in my eyelids, so I tossed on a navy peacoat and stepped into streets still slick with night rain. Sarah chose Moonrise Cafe, our old refuge near Hawthorne. Even from half a block away I could smell the cinnamon rolls they proof overnight, the sugar crusted on top like frost. Inside, honey-warm bulbs dangled over mismatched tables, light pooling on polished wood, soft jazz tracing the air. Steam billowed from the espresso machine, hissing like a friendly dragon. Sarah spotted me, lifted 2 mugs in greeting, and slid one across the table the instant I sat. "Quad shot, splash of oat milk," she said. "Emergency strength." I wrapped both hands around the cup, letting the heat bleed into my fingers. She studied my face, no makeup, dark crescents under the eyes, and her expression gentled. "Rough night?" I exhaled through my nose, a brittle laugh. "Define rough. Dad stonewalled me. I confronted a lawyer, found proof they changed Grandma's will, and I didn't throw my laptop out the window, so... Success?" Sarah leaned forward, elbows on the table, cardigan sleeves bunched around her wrists. "Tell me everything." As the cafe filled with the clatter of plates and quiet conversations, words poured out of me. Conway's file room, the sticky note, the email from James Carlton. I talked until my voice turned hoarse, until I'd scraped the last shard of confusion onto the tabletop between us. Sarah listened without interruption, save for the tiniest gestures, a thumb rubbing the rim of her mug, a slow blink whenever I mentioned betrayal, a sharp inhale when she realized the house was taken behind my back. When I finally stopped, chest heaving like I'd run a mile, she reached across and squeezed my wrist. "Em," she said softly, "your grandma always knew you were the heart of that place. Remember how she used to sit us on the porch swing and spin stories about the Carter treasure?" A rush of childhood summer, sun-warmed porch boards, iced tea sweating in mason jars, fireflies flickering at dusk. I could almost taste the sweetness of mint leaves Grandma tucked behind my ear like a secret. "Yeah," I murmured. Her voice would drop to a whisper, and she'd say, "Some things are kept safe for the right moment and for the right person." Sarah's eyes sparked. "Maybe that moment's now." My fingers tightened around the mug. "You think the treasure was real, not just bedtime magic?" "I think Margaret Carter wasn't in the habit of wasting words," Sarah said, lips curling into the half-smile she used whenever a crazy idea started sounding reasonable. "She'd mention a locked box in the attic, remember? Silver clasp, old leather, smells like cedar." Her fingers mimed the shape between us. Images bloomed. 8-year-old me sneaking up steep attic stairs, dust motes swirling in beams of afternoon light, Grandma catching me by the hand before I could pry at the trunk in the corner. One day she'd promised. But not yet, Bright Eyes. A pulse beat behind my ribs, steady, hopeful. If she left something for me, it might explain everything, or prove Dad never had the right to sell. "So we find it," Sarah said simply. She tugged a yellow notepad from her tote, flipping to a clean page. "Step 1. Track down records. The city archives keep property surveys, renovation blueprints, maybe even Margaret's deeds. There could be a paper trail straight to that attic box." I laughed. Short, incredulous, but real. "You haven't changed, always ready with a plan." "Someone has to keep you from head-butting brick walls," she teased, tapping the notepad. "Besides, archives close at 6. If we hustle, we can be there by lunch." A hush fell over our corner. Music drifted. The espresso machine groaned, yet in that instant, the entire cafe felt still. Possibility tasted like the first sip of hot coffee, sharp, exhilarating, scalding enough to wake me. I rested a hand on the photo tucked inside my coat pocket, the one of Grandma and me. The edges were frayed now, but the image anchored me the way talismans are meant to. "Let's do it," I said. We finished our drinks in companionable silence, scribbling a short checklist. Call Conway for updates, pack phone charger, bring flashlight in case the archive's back rooms were dim. Small tasks, but each stroke of ink felt like fitting armor over raw skin. Outside, the clouds parted briefly, weak sun flashing on puddles. Sarah's Civic waited at the curb, a bumper sticker peeling at the corners, "Make good trouble." She tossed the notepad onto the dash, glanced at me. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be." I clicked my seatbelt, heart thudding a fraction faster with every block we drove west. Downtown traffic snarled around construction cones, but soon brick facades gave way to the grand neoclassical columned face of the Portland City Archives. Pigeons fluttered along the ledges, cooing like gossiping neighbors. I stepped out, shoes crunching on wet gravel, tilting my head up. Stone lions flanked the stairs, rainwater glistening on their manes. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed softly over rows of metal shelves stretching into dim recesses. The air smelled of brittle paper, machine oil, and that peculiar hush found only in rooms heavy with memory. A receptionist glanced up from a Louis L'Amour paperback. "Research request?" he asked. I slid the old photo across the desk. "Emily Carter. I'm looking for property records, family documents, anything connected to Margaret Carter, Ashbury, Oregon. House built 1894, Cedar Lane." He flicked the photo's corner, considering. "That'll be basement vault A3. With a practiced flourish, he handed me a visitor badge and waved toward the elevator. "Watch your step. Lighting's temperamental." Sarah and I exchanged a look. "Temperamental," she mouthed, eyebrows rising. I snorted, nerves loosening for a heartbeat. The elevator rattled downward, cable humming. In the mirrored wall I saw us, Sarah's steady grin beside my tense shoulders. Yet beneath the tension lay a gleam, like a candle refusing to die. Basement corridors smelled of damp limestone. One bulb flickered overhead, casting our shadows along rows of filing cabinets and high-density mobile shelving. I traced my fingers along rust-rough handles, reading labels, 1900, 1909, 1910, 1919. Vault A3 waited behind a half-open steel door. I pushed gently, hinges groaned, echoing down the aisle. Inside, boxes stacked ceiling-high leaned like weary giants. Dust spiraled in our flashlight beams. Sarah coughed. "If there's a spider the size of a dachshund, I'm leaving you." I cracked a smile. "Deal. But if we find diamonds, I'm buying you spider therapy." We waded in. Each box had a code. MC 1990, MC 1991. My pulse spiked when I saw MC 1995. Cardboard flaps stuck together. I peeled them apart, coughing as a puff of dust burst upward. Inside lay folders wrapped in twine, edges yellowed. I slid one free, Carter, Margaret, personal effects. The twine left indentations on my palm as I untied it. First came property tax receipts, handwritten letters, a pressed daisy still faintly golden. And at the very bottom, heavier than the others, a leather-bound journal stamped with Grandma's initials. My breath hitched. Fingers trembled so badly I almost dropped it. Sarah steadied my elbow. "Slow," she whispered. The cover smelled of cedar and something faintly floral, as if Grandma's lavender drawer liners had seeped into the pages. My thumb brushed the silver clasp, tarnished but intact. Locked. "Of course," I muttered. I could almost hear Grandma chuckling at my impatience. Sarah held up a tiny brass key she'd fished from the same folder, dangling it like a magician revealing her final trick. "Lady Luck?" she grinned. I slid the key home. The click was soft, satisfying. The sound of secrets loosened from their chains. But just as I lifted the cover, distant footsteps echoed, heavy, deliberate, somewhere out in the corridor. We froze. Lights overhead flickered, plunging us into a stuttering half-dark. My pulse cannoned in my ears, yet I felt strangely alive, poised between dread and discovery. "Maybe she left something for me," I breathed, voice barely a thread. The journal in my hands seemed to hum as if charged with electricity, and with the next flutter of fluorescent light, I opened it. The clasp surrendered with a faint metallic sigh, and the journal, opened like a breath held for decades, finally exhaled. A curl of lavender-scented dust drifted upward, catching in the failing fluorescent light. My thumb hesitated on the first brittle page while my ears strained for the footsteps that had echoed outside the vault a moment earlier. Silence now, thick and watchful. Sarah eased the door half-closed, her sneakers scuffing the concrete. "Probably just maintenance," she whispered, though her eyes tracked the darkness as if it might grow teeth. I forced a nod and lowered my gaze to the page. Grandma's handwriting, ink slightly blurred, loops graceful but purposeful, marched across yellowed paper. March 3, 1935. For future Carters who remember more than they are told. A prickling traveled up my spine. My pulse drummed in my fingertips while I scanned the entry. Margaret, 20 years old then, wrote of banks collapsing, neighbors lining up for bread, and my great-grandfather pacing the parlor at night, whispering about foreclosure. She described how she and her mother rescued what little wealth the family had, a parcel of jewelry, a deed, a few bearer bonds, all slipped into a tin strongbox where no creditor's hand will ever reach. My breath fogged the page, so the treasure was real, tangible, catalogued in ink. I imagined the necklace she mentioned, rubies like frozen drops of wine, humming beneath attic floorboards for nearly a century. A page crackled as I turned it. July 10th, 1952. Robert must never find the map unless he can be trusted. Robert. My father's name. Except the handwriting predated him by decades. This Robert was my great-uncle, long gone. Still, the line felt like prophecy. I flicked to later entries, skimming years like skipping stones. Sarah hovered at my shoulder, breath warm against my ear. Any clues? Plenty, I murmured. Listen to this. June 14th, 1995. Emily is nearly 8. She loves the arbor. She believes in stories. Perhaps she will believe in this one when I am gone. I have redrawn the map and hidden the key under the loose brick by the cellar stairs. If Robert or Linda force the sale, she must know the truth. Ink blotches punctuated the sentence like tears. My knees went weak. Grandma had written my name, had planned for betrayal 27 years before it happened. Sarah's hand steadied my elbow. Loose brick, she repeated under her breath. Cellar stairs. That's a real location. I swallowed hard, which means the strongbox might still be there unless my parents found it first. Another page. The entry dated just 14 months before Grandma died. February 1st, 2022. Michael visited, eyes restless. Spoke of debts. I fear he knows about the first will. Robert insists we talk family future. I have refused. If they sell the house, it will be to bury my legacy. Emily must have enough light to find her way. The penstroke trailed off as if she'd been interrupted. My vision blurred. Heat coiled behind my eyes, but I refused to blink. They knew. Dad, Mom, Michael, they all knew. And they sold the house anyway. I snapped the journal shut, heartbeat hammering so loudly I half expected the security guard to appear. Instead, only the buzz of lights and the faint hum of an air vent rippled through the vault. Sarah looked at me, face pale beneath the weak glow. Your grandmother practically mapped out a war plan. And my family burned the battlefield to cover their tracks. I slid the journal into my tote, hands shaking so much the leather squeaked. But she left me the compass. Something banged in the hallway, maybe the janitor's cart. Instinctively, we both shrank deeper into the aisle of boxes. My back pressed cold metal shelving. Cardboard flaps brushed my hair. Every nerve screamed flight, yet another impulse, stubborn, blazing, planted my feet. Run? After coming this far? No. I inhaled, tasting dust and determination. We copy the entries, I whispered. Photos, everything. Then we walk out like law-abiding citizens. 10 minutes later, my phone's gallery held 23 images. Maps sketched in faded violet ink, lists of jewels, notes about trust and doubt. Each snapshot felt like a fragment of Grandma's heartbeat, still pulsing through glass pixels. While Sarah returned files exactly as we'd found them, I traced my fingers over the journal's cover one last time. The silver monogram MC shimmered faintly. The musky cedar scent clung to my skin. The corridor outside was empty when we finally stepped out, but I couldn't shake the sensation of unseen eyes. We signed out at the reception desk, pen scratching, laminated badges sliding across the counter. The clerk barely glanced up. Outside, daylight had brightened. Clouds tore open to reveal a shard of blue sky. Cool wind rushed past, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and cherry blossoms starting to split their buds. Sarah grew animated as soon as we reached the car. Okay, evidence of the treasure, clear intent to leave it to you, and a physical clue about a loose brick. That's leverage and a scavenger hunt all in one. I sank into the passenger seat, journal clutched to my chest. Micro tremors still rippled through my muscles. And a reason to confront them. My voice was steadier now, steel beneath velvet. She started the engine. The radio crackled to life with an old Sam Cooke tune, soft, hopeful. For a wild second, I wanted to laugh. Sam sang about change coming. I felt it vibrating in my bones. As we merged onto I-5 southbound, Portland's skyline receded in the rearview mirror, gleaming glass swallowed by mist. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. A male voice, low, thin, with forced calm. "Emily, it's Michael." My grip tightened on the seatbelt. Sarah glanced sideways, eyebrows poised. "What do you want?" I asked, keeping my words clipped. "Dad says you're stirring things up. Leave it alone. The house is gone. Nothing good will come from digging." I pictured his restless eyes from Grandma's entry. Debts, lies. "Maybe nothing good for you," I replied. "I found her journal, Mike. She wrote everything down." Silence. Then a sharp inhale, like a man wading into icy water. "Just don't do anything rash. We'll talk." He hung up. I exhaled a shaky laugh. "He's worried," I told Sarah. "Good," she said, switching lanes with abrupt confidence. "Let him sweat." Fields unfurled outside the window, emerald rows of budding crops, barns tilting under the sun. With every mile my resolve thickened. The journal lay across my lap. I thumbed its edge, feeling the groove where generations had opened and closed it. They stripped the wallpaper, auctioned the furniture, maybe even pocketed the keys, but they never erased her words, and words are power. 30 more miles to Ashbury. I watched mile markers clip past like a cardiogram's steady tick. A pang of memory surfaced. Grandma humming folk songs during road trips, glove compartment mints, her fingers tapping the steering wheel in time. I closed my eyes, letting the hum of tires on wet pavement become her lullaby. Suddenly, Sarah's phone pinged with a text from Conway. "Found codicil MC 1995 EC. Definitely favors Emily. Call ASAP." She whooped, thumping the steering wheel. I grinned so hard my cheeks ached. Proof upon proof, their carefully constructed lie fracturing like ice under spring thaw. Rain began again, soft, silver, cleansing. Drops streaked the windshield, each one catching light. Sarah flipped the wipers. They swished a steady rhythm, anticipation's heartbeat. As Ashbury's exit sign loomed ahead, I pressed my palm to the cold glass. Somewhere behind those hills stood a Victorian house, white paint peeling, green shutters sighing in the wind, still holding its secrets. I would find the loose brick. I would open that strongbox. And when I did, my family would finally face what they'd tried to bury. I tightened my fist until my nails bit skin, the pain anchoring me in the moment. Then I whispered so low only I could hear, "They knew all along. Now it's my turn." The car veered off the highway toward the winding road that led home, and the storm-washed landscape seemed to lean closer, listening, ready. Ashbury appeared like a memory I wasn't ready to relive. The town hadn't changed much, still nestled between low hills and long-forgotten logging roads, still lined with aging oaks that creaked in the wind like they were trying to whisper secrets. Main Street wore the same sun-faded signs, the same crooked parking meters, the same stubborn resistance to time. Sarah slowed as we turned off the main drag, following Cedar Lane's sharp curve until it spilled out into the familiar cul-de-sac, and there it was, the house. My grandmother's house. The white Victorian loomed at the end like a ghost trying to remember it used to be alive. The shutters, those old green ones, were still there, though one dangled from a single hinge, clapping softly in the wind. The porch swing was gone. So was the grapevine arbor. A new SUV sat parked in the driveway, sleek and black, like it didn't belong in this story. I stared out the window, jaw clenched. My chest tightened the closer we came, each detail chipped away at me, those cracked steps I once tumbled down, that upstairs window where Grandma used to wave goodnight. It was all still there, and yet, nothing felt like mine anymore. Sarah cut the engine. "You okay?" "No," I said, "but I'm here." We walked up the path slowly. The lawn was neater than I remembered, edges trimmed with military precision. A wind chime tinkled faintly overhead. I paused on the front step, pressed my palm to the porch column. The paint flaked beneath my fingers, revealing the same pale wood I used to hide behind during hide-and-seek. I knocked. Footsteps approached. A tall man in his early 60s opened the door. His hair was iron gray, and he wore a pressed blue flannel shirt tucked neatly into khakis. His eyes, steel blue, skeptical, landed on me first, then on Sarah, then back to me. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice clipped. "My name is Emily Carter," I said, forcing each word steady. "This used to be my grandmother's house. Margaret Carter." His expression shifted slightly, recognition flickering. "I'm Mr. Hayes. We bought the place last year." I nodded. "I know. I grew up here. I'm not here to cause trouble. I believe there's something left in the house. Something hidden. And I was hoping you'd let me check." His brow furrowed. "You think we missed something?" "I know it sounds strange," I said quickly, "but my grandmother left behind a journal. She mentioned a hidden compartment near the cellar stairs. She didn't trust the rest of my family. I only just found out." He hesitated. His gaze flicked toward the interior of the house, then back to me. "We've redone most of the basement, torn out moldy drywall, sealed up some foundation cracks. If there's anything left, it'd be dumb luck." "I'm not asking for much," I said. "Just 15 minutes. I won't disturb anything." Mr. Hayes looked at Sarah, then at me again. His jaw worked silently before he stepped aside. "Basement's through the kitchen. You've got 20 minutes. "Thank you," I breathed. The house swallowed me whole. The moment I stepped across the threshold, time folded in on itself. The smell was different, fresher, like citrus cleaner and new paint, but the bones were the same. The creak of the hallway floorboards, the layout of the kitchen, the slope of the ceiling where I used to sit with coloring books while Grandma made biscuits. It all came rushing back like a flood held behind brittle dam walls. The cellar door was still tucked behind the pantry. Mr. Hayes flipped the light switch, but only 2 of the old bulbs blinked to life. "Watch the 3rd step," I said, out of habit. He gave me a sideways glance. "Loose?" "Always has been." We descended one by one, each footstep heavy with memory. The air grew colder, denser, and dust clung to the walls like stories still waiting to be told. Sarah held the flashlight steady while I ran my hand along the far wall. The concrete was smooth in places, but near the bottom of the stairwell something felt different. A faint crack outlined a brick near the floor, maybe the size of my palm. "Here," I whispered. I knelt, fingers shaking slightly as I pressed against the edges. Nothing. I tried again, this time sliding my nails into the seams. The brick shifted, just a little. My heart stuttered. I glanced at Mr. Hayes. "Do you mind if I try to remove it?" He gave a reluctant nod. With Sarah's help, we worked the brick loose. Dust puffed into the air, coating my sleeves, and behind it, just as the journal had described, was a hollow pocket lined in old wood. My breath caught. Inside was a small metal box, dull with age but unmistakably deliberate in its placement. I pulled it out, cradling it like it might break. The lid was secured with a simple latch. No lock. Just waiting. I opened it. Inside lay a folded parchment, brittle with time, and nestled beside it, a necklace, gold chain, ruby pendant shaped like a teardrop. I gasped. My throat tightened. Sarah whispered, "Is that?" "She described it," I said, voice trembling. "This was my great-great-grandmother's. It saved the family once, and now—" I lifted the parchment. It was a deed. Handwritten, notarized, and stamped with the year 1935. It transferred ownership of the Ashbury house to Margaret Carter, with a note that it was to remain in the family's direct line unless otherwise specified. Unless otherwise specified. My name wasn't on the deed, but I knew this was what Grandma had meant. This was the proof that my father had tried to bury, that Michael had pretended never existed. Mr. Hayes took a step forward. "Is that worth something?" "Yes," I said, "but not just in money." He studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Keep it. Looks like it was meant to be found." My eyes burned, but I didn't let the tears fall. I slid the necklace into my pocket and folded the parchment with careful hands. The box, the brick, the cellar, every inch of this moment felt sacred. As we stepped back into the kitchen, I turned to Mr. Hayes. "Thank you. You didn't have to let me in." "I did," he said simply. "You belonged here before I ever did." Outside, the wind had picked up. Clouds gathered again, but the air felt different now. Charged, like a storm clearing its throat before the sky breaks open. In the car, I stared down at the box in my lap. Sarah's voice was quiet. "Now what?" "I go to Conway," I said. "I show him the deed, the journal, the jewelry. If my family sold this house knowing all of this, there could be legal consequences. You ready for that fight?" I looked up, eyes hard. "They've stolen enough. It's time they face the truth." And as we pulled away from the house, leaving its shadow behind us, I couldn't help but think, they knew all along. But now I had proof. The necklace sat heavy in my coat pocket all the way back to Portland, its weight unnerving, as if every mile we drove pulled me deeper into a truth I could never unsee. I stared out the window as raindrops slid down the glass like veins, silent and insistent. The landscape blurred into grays and browns, Oregon's winter palette in full swing. But inside, I felt sharper than I'd ever been. The moment we reached the city, I called Conway. "I have it," I told him. "The deed, the jewelry, the journal." There was a pause on the other end, then his voice softened. "Bring it in. Today. We need to talk." By noon, I was back in that office with the lemon-polished wood and the too-quiet receptionist. Conway closed the blinds this time, ushered me to a conference table instead of his desk. His movements were slower, more deliberate. He wore the face of a man preparing for a funeral, except this one wasn't for the dead, but for a lie finally being lowered into the ground. I placed the journal in front of him, then the necklace, and finally the folded parchment. He opened the deed first, fingers gliding over the faded ink. His brow furrowed as he read. Then he flipped to the journal, paging through the entries with increasing tension in his shoulders. "This changes everything," he murmured. "Margaret made clear references to her intentions, and this—" He lifted the deed. "Maybe enough to prove fraud, especially in context with the journal entries and Carlton's email." "What happens now?" I asked, my voice raw. "We begin building a case." He looked at me over the rims of his glasses. "We'll need to file a request to review the probate documents. If your family knowingly excluded you while possessing this information, we may be looking at both civil and criminal violations." I nodded, jaw tight. "I want them to know they didn't win." Conway folded his hands. "Be careful, Emily. When people feel something slipping from their grip, especially power, they tend to get unpredictable." I thanked him and left the office with photocopies tucked under my arm and a plan burning in my chest. But I didn't go home. I went to the Brick House Diner off 10th and Belmont, Michael's favorite late lunch haunt. He always sat in the back, under the stained glass lamp that flickered from a loose wire. I hadn't been there in years, but as soon as I pushed through the glass door, I saw him. Alone, hunched over his phone, stirring his iced tea with the straw like he was trying to disappear. He looked up, startled, then immediately guilty. "Emily?" I slid into the booth across from him, never breaking eye contact. The server started toward us, but I waved her off. "We won't be long." He looked around like someone might save him. No one did. "You sold the house," I said, knowing it was supposed to go to me. He swallowed. "Dad said—" "Don't," I cut in. "I found Grandma's journal. I found the deed, the jewelry, the box behind the brick in the cellar." I leaned in. "She named me, again and again. She warned about this, about you." His hand trembled as he set his tea down. "You don't understand. Then help me," I said, quieter now, "because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you erased me." He stared at the napkin holder, his jaw flexing. "I had debt," he finally said. "I didn't ask for a loan. I just needed to not drown. Dad said it was better this way, that the house was a burden. He told me you didn't care." I scoffed. "I didn't care. I spent half my childhood in that house. She was the only one who made me feel seen." Michael looked at me then, eyes bloodshot. "I messed up. I know that." "But you didn't stop," I whispered. "You saw the will. You knew what she left behind. And you stayed quiet." Silence stretched between us like a snapped thread still vibrating. Finally, I pulled the journal from my bag and laid it gently on the table. "I'm not giving this to you. I'm not asking for forgiveness either. But you need to know, I'm taking back what's mine. I've spoken to Conway. This is happening." He looked down at the cover, that worn monogram, and for the first time in years I saw something crack in him. His hands curled into fists. You're going to tear the family apart. I shook my head. You did that already. When I stood, I heard his voice behind me, small, almost childlike. What if I help you? I turned. Why? He looked up, broken. Because maybe I'm tired of lying. I didn't answer. I just walked out, the bell above the door jingling like punctuation. That night I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by documents, photos, scans, Carlton's email, the property deed, copies of the journal pages. Sarah came by with Thai food and a bottle of red wine, but I barely touched either. I was building a war chest, piece by piece. She sat across from me, sipping from her glass, eyes following the mess of paper. You're going to win, she said. I have to. She reached over, took my hand. And when you do? What then? I didn't know. I only knew I wasn't going to be erased. My phone buzzed. A text from Conway. Prepping case files. Need to meet again Monday. Stay strong. And then another message. This time from Dad. We need to talk. I stared at it, then set the phone down. They're circling, I said aloud. Sarah nodded. Because they feel it coming. I closed my eyes. I could see the house again. The attic light at dusk, the creak of Grandma's footsteps, the smell of her perfume lingering in the hall. And beneath it all, the echo of her voice, steady and defiant. If they sell the house, it will be to bury my legacy. Well, they tried, but they didn't bury me. And now, it was time to bring everything into the light. Because I wasn't just fighting for what was mine. I was preparing to face them, together, in one room, and they wouldn't leave unchanged. The rain stopped just long enough for the sky to hold its breath. I stared up at the brick facade of the Hawthorne Community Hall, its windows glowing amber in the late afternoon gloom. A handmade banner, Carter Family Meeting, 4 p.m., hung crooked above the double doors, the red letters smudged by drizzle. I'd booked the room myself, sent the invitations myself, and told Conway to be on standby with his briefcase of truth. No more backroom whispers, no more phone calls that ended in silence. If they wanted to bury me, they'd have to shovel in public. Inside, folding chairs formed 2 uneasy rows beneath basketball court lights that buzzed like impatient hornets. The varnished floor smelled of lemon oil and decades of school dances. My heartbeat echoed in that hollow, polished space, every thud ricocheting off cinder block walls until it felt louder than the fluorescent hum. Relatives filtered in first, second cousins, aunts I hadn't seen since Grandma's funeral, eyes darting from me to the empty chairs at the front. I caught snippets of murmured speculation. Thought she lived in Portland, editing novels or something. Robert's temper, you know how he gets. I smoothed the pages of Grandma's deed on the card table I'd claimed as my own, fingers tracing the embossed seal like a mantra. In my pocket, the ruby pendant pressed against my leg, a small, steady weight reminding me why I was here. Then the door banged open. Dad entered first, suit jacket drenched at the shoulders, jaw already set to granite. Mom followed, tight-lipped, pearls gleaming beneath the harsh lights. Michael brought up the rear, collar unbuttoned, rainwater streaking his hair. He avoided my eyes, but his steps stuttered when he saw the journal resting atop the deed. A hush settled, as if the room itself inhaled. Dad's voice cracked the silence. "Emily, what is all this?" I studied him, every gray strand at his temples, the wrinkle above his brow that deepened whenever money came up. "A meeting," I said, "so we can finally lay everything on the table." He snorted, dropping his briefcase with a thud. "We could have discussed this at home." "Home?" The word tasted sour. "You mean the house you sold behind my back?" Aunt Diane gasped. Chairs creaked as relatives leaned closer, the air thickening with shared curiosity and dread. Mom stepped forward, smoothing her blazer like she could iron out this mess. "Darling, emotions are running high. Let's not—" "Emotions?" My hands curled around the journal. "You forged a new will and cut me out. That's not emotion. That's theft." Her cheeks reddened, but her voice stayed cool. "The house was falling apart. Taxes, repairs. Your grandmother wouldn't have wanted it to drain us." Dad crossed his arms. "We protected the family's future, something you know nothing about." The words sliced, neat and deep. I felt the old child-sized hurt flare, then harden into something sharper. I set the journal gently aside and lifted the deed for everyone to see. "This," I said, letting my voice ring against the walls, "is the original property deed. It names Grandma as sole owner and stipulates the house remains in her direct line unless she personally transfers it. She never did." Murmurs rippled. Dad's nostrils flared. His fingers drummed against his arm like Morse code for "stay calm." Michael took a tentative step. Maybe we should—" "You forged a second will," I pressed on, louder now. "You used it to claim a house that never legally belonged to you, then sold it to pay off debts." I looked straight at him. "You told me yourself." Gasps this time. Audible, collective. Michael's shoulders folded inward. I didn't mean for it to—" Dad's palm cracked against the table. Paper fluttered, the deed nearly sliding off. "Enough. You have no proof of forgery." I laid my hand over the journal's worn cover, feeling the grooves of Grandma's initials under my fingertips. "She documented everything. Dates, conversations, even references to the lawyer you bribed." Mom's pearl earrings trembled as she shook her head. "This is madness." I flipped open the journal to a bookmarked page. The entry naming me, warning of Robert and Michael's pressure. I read aloud, voice steady but trembling at the edges. "If they sell the house, it will be to bury my legacy. Emily must have enough light to find her way." The echo of Grandma's words settled over the hall like dust motes catching sunbeams, brief, beautiful, undeniable. I closed the book, pulse hammering. Dad opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. Microactions everywhere. Cousin Lydia clutched her necklace until her knuckles blanched. Uncle Pete counted silent beats on his knee. Even the overhead lights seemed to flicker with anticipation. Finally, Dad found his voice, bitter and brittle. "You were never part of this family's future." The sentence struck me square in the chest, but I stayed upright. I kept my shoulders eased back the way Grandma taught me, chin level, breath deep. Mom chimed in, her tone half pleading, half dismissive. "The house was a burden, Emily. We freed ourselves. You should thank us." "Thank you?" My laugh cracked like splitting ice. I slammed the journal on the table. The sound reverberated through the hall. "You stole my legacy!" The words rang out. Raw, final. Silence followed, thick as fog. Chairs stopped creaking. Breath seemed suspended. Even the buzzing lights dipped, as if bowing to the moment. Michael's voice broke the stillness, small and quivering. "This can't be happening." I leveled my gaze at him. "Oh, it is, because the next step is legal. Conway's filing tomorrow." I swept my eyes across every family face, letting the truth settle like winter frost. "You wanted me invisible, but here I am, and I'm not leaving." Dad's face drained of color. Mom pressed a hand to her lips. Michael rubbed the back of his neck like he could knead regret into something softer. Aunt Diane rose, voice wavering. "Robert, Linda, tell me she's lying." But they had no answer. I gathered the deed, the journal, the pendant, now gleaming crimson under fluorescent glare, and slipped them into my leather folder. My hands no longer shook. My voice no longer trembled. "I'm giving you all one night," I said, each word measured. "Tomorrow, when the petition hits the court docket, you'll see just how much Grandma protected me. And if any of you want to stand on the right side of history, you know my number." I turned toward the doors, heels clicking on varnished wood, each step a drumbeat of reclamation. Behind me, voices erupted, some angry, some pleading, all tangled in a desperate hum. I didn't look back. The air outside hit my face crisp and electric, carrying the scent of wet pavement and distant pine. Streetlights flickered on, casting halos around every raindrop suspended in the twilight. Sarah waited by the curb, engine idling, wipers ticking a steady metronome. When I climbed in, she didn't ask what happened. She could read it in the squared set of my shoulders, the calm storm in my eyes. We pulled away, tires hissing over rain-slick asphalt. In the rearview mirror, the community hall receded, brick, banner, and all the fractured illusions it contained, shrinking into a pinpoint of warm light swallowed by the deepening night. I exhaled, a tremor of relief and dread mingling in the same breath. The real fight, the legal reckoning, began at sunrise. But some part of me felt Grandma's hand on my back, steady, proud. And somewhere behind us, Michael's shaky words still lingered in that hall. "This can't be happening." Oh, but it was. and when the truth finally burst into full daylight, none of them would be able to look away. The courthouse filing went in at 9:01 a.m. sharp, but my pulse was already sprinting hours earlier. Sleep had come in ragged scraps, each one torn by images of Dad's clenched jaw and Michael's crumpled face. By dawn, I was pacing my apartment, the ruby pendant swinging against my collarbone like a metronome set to fight. That's when the question hit me. What if the cellar box wasn't everything? Grandma's journal kept whispering in my head, antique jewelry and deeds, plural, and a letter. One she'd promised would leave no room for doubt. I texted Mr. Hayes at 6:14 a.m., found more references in the journal. May I come back today? Need to check that compartment again. His reply came before the coffee finished brewing. House is yours till noon. Bring a flashlight. The workers pulled some fixtures. It's dark. The house. One more time, Sarah and I reached Ashbury under a pewter sky. Mist drifted across the cul-de-sac, softening the edges of every mailbox and hedge, but the Victorian rose crisp and white, as though it had decided to stand at attention for what came next. Inside, sheet-covered furniture and bundled drop cloths made the foyer look like a museum waiting for an opening night. The only sound was our footsteps on bare plank floors and the distant tick of a mantel clock someone had forgotten to wind. Down in the basement, the air tasted of old stone and cold earth. My breath fogged in the beam of the flashlight while Sarah held the cellar door steady, hinges removed, tools scattered from the renovation crew who'd quit early the day before. I knelt at the hollow where we'd found the metal box, and with gloved fingertips traced the cavity's wooden back panel. Think, Emily. Grandma's note about a map so simple no thief would bother to look twice. The backboard shifted half an inch when I pressed its upper edge. Heart pounding, I slid both hands under the lip and pulled. A thin plank swung out like a hidden cupboard door, revealing a recess that disappeared into darkness. Inside, a cedar chest no bigger than a carry-on, its brass corners green with age. I hauled it into the flashlight's cone, knees scraping concrete. Sarah exhaled a low whistle. That looks final. The clasp released with a stubborn click. The smell, lavender again, laced with faint gunmetal, rolled out in a wave so vivid I could almost hear Grandma humming. Nestled in folded velvet lay a torque bracelet of hammered gold, a brooch set with seed pearls, 2 leather-bound deed packets, and a sealed envelope edged in faded blue ink. My name spanned the front in Grandma's strong looping hand. To Emily, my true heir. For a second I could only stare. Then my fingers found the envelope's lip. The wax cracked and her voice seemed to rise off the page as I read, "If you're holding this, little bright eyes, it means the worst has happened. Those I loved forgot the meaning of that word. But blood alone is not family. Kindness is. This house, its contents, and whatever hope my trinkets can buy belong to you. Share them wisely. And when you read this aloud, watch their eyes. Truth has a way of widening even the smallest soul." Tears blurred the script. I pressed the letter to my chest, feeling its edges against the flutter of my heart. Sarah squeezed my shoulder. "You ready to make them listen?" I wiped my eyes, slid the jewelry and deeds into the chest, and locked the clasp. More than ready. The second reckoning. By 3:30 that afternoon, the community hall lights buzzed to life again. Word travels quick in a small town. Every seat was filled this time. Cousins, in-laws, half the coffee shop regulars. Even the mailman leaned against the back wall, cap in hand, curiosity shining like a porch bulb at dusk. Dad arrived last, flanked by Mom and Michael. No one spoke, but the tension followed them down the aisle like a riptide. I stood at the card table, cedar chest in front of me, Conway to my right, silver-rimmed spectacles glinting as he organized documents. Dad's eyes landed on the chest. A flicker, fear, crossed his face before the familiar scowl snapped down. "We aren't doing this circus again." "Yes," I said, voice ringing. "We are doing it exactly once more, and then it's over." I opened the chest. Gasps rippled through the hall as the gold and pearls caught the harsh gym lights. Mom's hand flew to her throat, mirroring the necklace's curve. Michael muttered a curse under his breath. I lifted the envelope. "Grandma wrote this for everyone to hear." Dad stepped forward. "Emily, put that down." Conway cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, I advise you to listen." Silence fell, thick as stage curtains. I unfolded the letter and read. Every sentence felt like a bell chiming inside me, clear, irrevocable. "At belongs to Emily, my true heir," Aunt Diane gasped aloud. Uncle Pete's jaw went slack. When the last word echoed off cinder block, I lowered the page. My hands were steady now, my breath calm. Dad's face had gone a chalky gray. Mom swayed slightly, gripping the back of a chair. Michael stared at the floorboards as if they might open and swallow him. Mom's whisper drifted to the first row. "We're ruined." Michael's shoulders crumpled inward, micro-actions betraying the boy who once shared backyard forts with me, now drowning in choices he'd made. He covered his eyes with one shaking hand. I felt a surge, not gloating exactly, more like rightness finally locking into place. The hollow space their betrayal had carved in me suddenly filled with something warm and solid. I turned to the crowd. "You've heard her words. You've seen the evidence. The house sale was fraudulent. The will was tampered with. Today, Conway files to void that sale and restore every asset to Grandma's intended beneficiary." Dad tried one last volley, voice ragged. "Do you care nothing for what this does to our name?" I met his gaze, level and unblinking. "Your name will survive telling the truth. It will not survive hiding from it." He had no reply. Only the buzz of the lights, the collective hum of people breathing the same charged air. Conway snapped the cedar chest shut, turned the key, and tucked it under his arm. "We're adjourned," he announced, courtroom cadence echoing. Chairs scraped back, murmurs rose, sympathy, awe, a few poorly disguised "I told you so's." I stepped away from the table, the ruby pendant catching a red shard of light as I did. Dad sank into a folding chair. Mom pressed tremulous fingers to her lips. Michael covered his face completely now, elbows on knees. As the hall emptied, I lingered one moment longer, sweeping my gaze across the scuffed floor, the crooked banner, the echo of generations that had led to this strange, necessary victory. I breathed in the lemon oil and dust and faint adrenaline and thought, this ends now, into the light of tomorrow. Outside, dusk bled gold along the horizon. Sarah waited beneath the awning, raincoat hood down, face uplifted to the clearing sky. She smiled when she saw me, soft, proud. "Finished?" "Finished here," I answered, slipping my arm through hers. "Next, the court." We walked down the wet steps together, heels clicking in sync. Behind us, the banner flapped in an evening breeze, its smudged red letters half-shadowed, half bright in the streetlights. At the corner, Conway's sedan idled. He leaned out the window. "I'll file the amended petition first thing. Expect a hearing date within 2 weeks." I nodded. The cool air carried the scent of wood smoke and wet pavement. It filled my lungs, and I felt taller than ever. Sarah squeezed my hand. "Emily, you did it." "Almost," I said, watching headlights glide along the sleepy street. "Next comes the part where a judge stamps it in ink." She raised an eyebrow. "And your family?" I glanced back at the hall's glowing doorway where silhouettes lingered. Dad hunched, Mom pale, Michael still unmoving. They'll have to decide whether to keep fighting or finally tell the truth. I took one last look at the banner, then at the night sky widening above us, clear and deep. Somewhere in that indigo expanse, I imagined Grandma's laugh, light, triumphant, forever. Tomorrow the legal battle would begin in earnest, but tonight 100 hidden pages had finally seen the light. And as I tucked the envelope safely into my coat, its paper still warm from my hands, I heard my own voice whisper a promise meant for the next sunrise. Time to step into the courtroom and reclaim everything that bears my name. Courtrooms smell nothing like movies. Instead of mahogany grandeur, the Multnomah County Circuit Court offered scrubbed linoleum and recycled air that tasted faintly of stale coffee. Fluorescent bulbs hummed overhead, cold and relentless, illuminating every scuff on the benches, every wrinkle in my father's brow, every nervous twitch in Michael's jaw. Yet the moment the bailiff called my case, the entire room seemed to sharpen, colors truer, edges clearer, as if the truth itself had finally walked in and turned up the lights. I rose when the clerk announced, "Carter v. Carter et al., palms damp against the smooth cedar of the table." Beside me, Mr. Daniels straightened his charcoal suit, eyes glinting with calm fire. He slid the cedar chest forward as though presenting a crown. Across the aisle, Dad's attorney shuffled papers, already sweating through his collar. Mom clutched a tissue she hadn't yet used. She kept twisting it into tighter knots. Michael wouldn't look up. The ruby pendant at my collarbone felt warm, almost alive, as if Grandma were pressing a reassuring hand there. The judge, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked curls and eyes sharper than winter light, peered over half-moon glasses. "Counsel, your opening." Mr. Daniels stood. "Your Honor, this is a simple matter of intent versus deception." His voice carried, rich as cello strings. Margaret Carter's true wishes were hidden, her granddaughter denied, and her estate diverted for personal gain. Today we restore the rightful chain of custody. He clicked a handheld remote. The screen behind us lit with photographs, pages of Grandma's journal, the deed stamped 1935, the letter sealed to Emily, my true heir. Gasps rippled through the gallery as each image bloomed. Micro-expressions, eyebrows shooting up, mouths parting, flashed like a strobe across onlookers' faces. Then came the video. Sarah had filmed yesterday's public reading, my voice quavering yet steadfast as I spoke Grandma's words. In the footage, Dad's face drained. Mom whispered, "We're ruined." The judge watched, expression unreadable, fingers tented under her chin. Opposing counsel rose, voice brittle. "Your Honor, the amended 2022 will..." "Was executed under duress," Daniels interrupted smoothly, advancing to the next slide. James Carlton's email flagged important, don't delete. A scanned affidavit from Carlton's secretary corroborated it. Furthermore, the defendants had knowledge of the original deed and concealed it. Dad's lawyer sputtered, papers rattling like nervous sparrows. Mom's tissue finally met tears. Michael's shoulders collapsed inward, unable to feign indifference. The judge raised a hand. Silence fell, so sudden my heartbeat sounded thunderous. "I have seen enough." Her gaze swept the room, pausing on me, then on my parents. "The evidence of fraud is compelling and unrefuted. This court hereby voids the contested sale of 113 Cedar Lane, Ashbury, Oregon, and restores full title and contents to Emily Carter." A sound escaped me, half laugh, half sob, but I swallowed it, back straight. Mr. Daniels placed a steadying hand on my elbow while the judge continued. "Additionally, statutory damages are awarded in the amount of $120,000 to compensate for lost property value and emotional distress. Ms. Carter, the perseverance you displayed in uncovering this deception honors your grandmother's legacy." Her gavel struck once, sharp, declarative, echoing off cinder-block walls like a starter pistol for a new life. The silence after judgment, I exhaled a breath I'd been holding for years. The fluorescent bulbs still buzzed, but now they sounded almost melodic. Dad's attorney collapsed into his seat. Mom pressed both hands over her mouth to stifle a sob. Michael looked up at me for the first time, eyes rimmed red. He mouthed, "I'm sorry." I held his gaze, felt something soft and complicated stir, then let my eyes slide away. Forgiveness would be its own journey, one I wasn't ready to map just yet. Outside, a light wind scattered cherry blossom petals across the courthouse steps, swirling them around my boots like confetti. Reporters jostled for statements, cameras flashing. Mr. Daniels fielded most questions, voice measured. I managed one clear sentence. "I'm grateful the truth spoke louder than fear." Flashbulbs popped, petals kept spinning. Relief seeped into my bones like late afternoon sun. Homecoming 3 weeks later, paperwork stamped and wired funds transferred. I drove back to Ashbury alone. The house awaited like an old friend newly woken. Fresh white paint gleaming, shutters rehung, porch swing reinstalled by Mr. Hayes as a congratulatory gesture. Workers' ladders still leaned against the siding, the scent of sawdust mingling with lilac drifting from the hedges. I stepped onto the porch, boards creaking a familiar welcome. My fingers hovered over the doorknob. For a heartbeat I hesitated, afraid the moment I entered the spell might break. Then I turned the knob and crossed the threshold. Sunlight slanted through restored stained glass transoms, scattering emerald and sapphire shards across polished oak floors. New plaster met old beams in a seamless marriage of past and present. Tools rested in tidy piles, renovation plans tacked neatly to walls. The air smelled of paint, plaster dust, and faint lavender. The sachet I'd hidden in the front closet my first night of ownership. I pressed my palm to the foyer wall, the same spot 8-year-old me had leaned while Grandma tied my shoelaces. The wood felt warmer than I remembered, pulsing with quiet life. My throat tightened, tears pricking. I breathed out, barely a whisper, "It's mine again." One tear slipped, tracing salt over my smile. I didn't brush it away. Rooms full of echoes, I wandered room to room, every creak underfoot a familiar syllable in the language of home. In the parlor, sunbeams danced over the torque bracelet, brooch, and pendant arranged beneath glass, my small museum of survival. Upstairs, fresh drywall muffled the hallway echo, but the attic door still squealed the same way when opened. I climbed those narrow stairs, dust motes swirling like slow snow in the skylight. Bare rafters stretched overhead, awaiting insulation. Between them, memories nested, firefly jars, bedtime ghost stories, Grandma's laughter rumbling low like distant thunder. I closed my eyes and heard her voice again, calm and sure. "You are my legacy, Emily." When I came back down, twilight had spilled lavender and peach across the windows. I brewed tea, chamomile her favorite, and sat on the porch swing, mug cupped between my palms. The chain groaned lightly as I rocked, but the motion soothed every taut muscle. A cardinal settled on the arbor, cocking its head as if inspecting the changes. Wind rattled the grapevine, bare now, but come summer it would bloom again. I folded my free hand over the deed resting in my lap. The gold seal caught the setting sun, flaring briefly. Pride washed through me, clean, buoyant. This house had always been the heart of our family's story. Now it beat again under my name, not as a trophy, but as a promise. Towards something larger, headlights approached, slowing by the curb. Sarah stepped out, carrying a rolled blueprint tube and 2 paint sample books under one arm. She waved, grin bright as porch-light amber. "Ready to turn this place into something amazing?" she called. I laughed, full-bodied, unburdened. "You read my mind." She climbed the steps, spreading sketches across the porch floor. Community center layouts, reading nook alcoves, a kitchen designed for neighborhood potlucks. Her excitement crackled in the evening air, mixing with mine until the future felt electric. "You sure you're up for this?" she asked, searching my eyes. I glanced at the swing's worn armrest, then at the star-pricked sky forming overhead. Every breath tasted like cedar and promise. "I want every beam, every brick to welcome people the way Grandma welcomed me," I said. "It's time this house stopped holding secrets and started holding stories." Sarah nodded, blinking back tears. "Then let's get to work." The last light of day, we stayed on the porch mapping dreams until the first cricket chirped. When Sarah finally packed up, night had deepened to velvet. She hugged me tight, blueprint tube knocking my shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. I hugged back, pendants and memories pressed between us. "We did, but tomorrow we start something even bigger." After she drove off, I lingered at the railing. Fireflies sparked in the garden, tiny lanterns testing the dark. Somewhere in town, a church bell chimed 9 times, each toll drifting on cool air. I closed my eyes and pictured the grand opening, neighbors laughing, children painting, music spilling through windows flung wide. I saw the walls lined with photo collages, Grandma in her garden, me clutching that old Polaroid, Mr. Hayes handing me the cellar key, a chorus of everyday miracles. My heartbeat slowed to match the swing's gentle sway. I looked at the house one more time, lights glowing warm behind lace curtains, and felt certainty settle deep. This place is finally alive again, because it's finally honest. I wiped a thumb beneath my eye, caught the last tear before it fell. Then I whispered, fierce and soft, "Time to make it my own." And in that hush between one dream realized and the next one begun, the door to tomorrow cracked open, inviting me to step inside and build a new kind of family. The next morning began with the scent of coffee and the sound of laughter drifting through freshly painted walls. For the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel like a museum to grief. It felt alive. Sunlight spilled through the front windows, catching motes of dust dancing above a dining table we'd dragged in from the garage. The The room, once stiff with silence, now buzzed with voices, movement, and plans layered over memories. Sarah stood at the head of the table, arms stretched wide like a conductor summoning an orchestra. "Okay," she grinned, tapping a rolled-up poster board against the surface. "Today we map this place out, room by room, idea by idea." Beside her sat Luis, a carpenter from 2 doors down, who'd brought his toolbox and his teenage daughter, Mia, who quietly sketched mural ideas on the corner of a notepad. Across from me, Ms. Green, the retired librarian who'd known Grandma from her garden club, adjusted her glasses and reached for another cinnamon bun. It wasn't just a planning session, it was the beginning of something sacred. "This kitchen?" Sarah said, spreading out the blueprint. "It needs a commercial stove. We're talking soup drives in the winter, maybe a Saturday community dinner once a month. Open door. No questions asked." Luis nodded. "I can knock out the old pantry wall, create more prep space, and I've got tile connections, cheap but not ugly." Ms. Green smiled. "I'll handle book donations for the reading room. There's magic in a quiet corner with a lamp and a worn paperback." I leaned back in my chair, coffee mug warming my hands. The fire crackled faintly in the hearth behind us, and the scent of cinnamon and paint lingered in the air. The pendant around my neck tapped softly against the porcelain, its rhythm like a second heartbeat. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. I watched these people, strangers once, and realized how quickly warmth can take root when you leave space for it. Still, there were moments when ghosts brushed the edges of my thoughts. When Mia laughed, I remembered myself in that same room, coloring at Grandma's feet as she peeled apples with a paring knife so thin it bent at the edge. When Luis showed us a sketch for the outdoor sign, Carter House Community Haven, my throat caught. I could almost hear Grandma chuckle. I always said this house should have a purpose. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself pacing the upstairs hall, notebook in hand. I paused outside the guest room, my old bedroom. The door creaked open to reveal sun-warmed floors and freshly primed walls, waiting for color. I sat cross-legged on the hardwood, letting memory spill in. The night after Grandma's funeral, I'd sat right there, 15 and numb, holding a letter she never got to finish. Mom had rushed us back to Portland the next day. That was the last time I'd slept in this room, until now. A knock stirred me. Sarah peeked in, 2 mugs in hand. "You disappeared." "I needed to breathe," I said, accepting the cup. She sat beside me, legs stretched out. "It's wild, isn't it? You fought like hell to get this place back, and now you're turning it into something brand new." I smiled faintly. She would have loved this. Sarah studied me for a beat. "You okay?" "I am, or I'm getting there." We sipped in silence. The house creaked around us, but it was the good kind. The sound of walls settling after change, of foundations finding peace. Downstairs, someone turned on a radio. Fleetwood Mac's Landslide floated upward, bittersweet and perfect. Sarah nudged me. "You're building more than a community center, you know." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "You're building a new family, piece by piece." That word, family, hit something inside me I hadn't touched in months. Not since the betrayal, not since the courtroom. It no longer felt sharp, just different. "I guess I am," I whispered. And for the first time I believed it. Later that week we hosted the first open house. Folding chairs ringed the parlor, and a table near the front door overflowed with lemon bars, brownies, and thermoses of hot cider. The scent of baked apples and sugar filled the air. Laughter echoed off high ceilings. Footsteps thumped along the hallway, and through the windows came the sound of kids chasing each other through the yard. People came, more than we expected. Neighbors, old classmates, even Mrs. Ramirez from the flower shop who brought a vase of sunflowers and told stories about Grandma's volunteer shifts at the library. Some folks came for the food, some for the books, some just to remember. Michael came too. He stood in the doorway like a man unsure if he was welcome, holding a plant in a brown paper sack. He didn't say much, just nodded, handed me the pot and whispered, "For the garden." Then he walked around the porch once before leaving. I didn't stop him, but I also didn't look away. Later, I found the plant on the windowsill, rosemary, Grandma's favorite. After everyone left, I stood on the porch with Sarah, watching the last of the taillights fade down the gravel lane. The house glowed behind us, full of warm echoes. My chest ached in the best possible way. "Today was good," she said. "It was more than good," I murmured. "It was healing." A breeze tugged at my scarf. Somewhere beyond the hedges, wind chimes clinked like soft bells. I looked at Sarah. "You ever think about how this all started? A single photo, a text from you, a lie buried in a will." "And look where you are now," she said, looping her arm through mine. "Not where I thought I'd end up," I admitted, "but exactly where I need to be." We stood there for a long moment, listening to the quiet, a quiet that no longer felt lonely but full. Then, without warning, the porch light flickered once. Twice. I frowned. "That's weird." Sarah smirked. "You think it's Grandma?" "Maybe," I smiled. "Or maybe this old house is just settling into the idea that it's loved again." The porch light steadied. We both laughed. Then I turned, stepping back into the house, into the laughter that lingered in corners, the scent of rosemary and sugar, and the soft rhythm of community taking root. The walls didn't whisper secrets anymore. Now they echoed with something better. But deep in the attic, sealed behind one of the old beams, was still one more envelope I hadn't opened yet, one Sarah found tucked inside a cedar box during cleanup. It was addressed not to me, but to Robert Carter, my father, and somehow I knew whatever was written inside could change everything, again. Mist clung to the hedges like silver lace the morning the Carter house reopened its doors. I stepped onto the porch just after sunrise, coffee steaming in my gloved hands, and let the chill sting my cheeks awake. Past the gate, Main Street was still half asleep, shopfront windows fogged, a lone cyclist coasting through puddles, but ribbons of soft amber light were already spilling across our lawn, as if the day itself wanted a front-row seat. Inside, the house hummed with last-minute preparations. Luis adjusted the brand-new sign over the entryway, Carter House Community Haven, tightening the final screw with a satisfied twist of his wrist. Mia knelt beside the foyer desk, arranging brochures in a perfect fan. Every so often she bit the inside of her cheek, smoothing an invisible crease. Ms. Green bustled between rooms with a clipboard, her sensible shoes squeaking over polished floorboards. So many hands, so many hearts, all beating in one rhythm. I hovered by the staircase, half hidden behind the banister, feeling my own pulse match theirs. A tremor of disbelief fluttered through me. This is really happening, followed by a grateful warmth that reached all the way to my fingertips. The ruby pendant brushed my collarbone with every breath, its gentle thump reminding me whom I was carrying with me. "Doors open in 20 minutes, Emily." Sarah's voice drifted from the dining room. She appeared in the archway, wiping paint flecks off her jeans, ponytail escaping its tie. "Ready?" I tried to answer, but emotion clogged my throat. Instead, I nodded and pressed my palm flat against the banister's smooth grain, grounding myself in oak and varnish and the faint scent of lavender that seemed embedded in the walls. Outside, the drizzle had stopped. Clouds thinned to diaphanous ribbons, revealing patches of clean blue sky. The wind carried the distant clatter of folding chairs being set up on the front lawn. I walked out onto the porch just as Luis unrolled the ceremonial ribbon, a wide sweep of deep red satin that caught every shaft of light. Neighbors arrived first. Mrs. Ramirez from the flower shop, apron still dusted with pollen. Mr. Chang, the retired electrician, lugging 2 extension cords just in case. A flock of middle schoolers gathered around a guitar, plucking tentative chords. Then came classmates I hadn't seen since graduation, volunteers from the food co-op, folks who'd only ever driven past the old Victorian and wondered what secrets lived inside. They streamed through the gate in 2s and 3s, voices overlapping like birdsong. I watched from the porch steps, hands clasped to still their nervous tremor. Each new face brought a flutter of memory. Grandma handing out peaches in summer, her laugh ringing across the yard. She would have loved this swelling tide of life. At 10 sharp, Sarah tapped a spoon against a glass. The chime rang clear, slicing neatly through the chatter. Conversation stilled, eyes turned to the porch. My cue. I drew a slow breath, felt cold air fill my lungs, then stepped to the lectern Luis had built from reclaimed cedar. The wood smelled faintly of smoke and evergreen sap. 100 expectant faces glimmered in the late morning light. The pendant at my throat pulsed against my skin like a steady drum. I gripped the edges of the lectern, letting my fingers register every ridge, every knot. Then I spoke. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice softer than intended but growing steadier with each word. "When this house was built in 1894, it was meant to shelter one family. Over the years, its walls absorbed celebrations, losses, stories whispered after midnight, songs sung in the garden. My grandmother, Margaret Carter, used to say that every time someone crossed the threshold with kindness in their heart, the house grew a little bigger, not on the outside, but on the inside, where it counts." I paused. Wind rustled the maple leaves overhead, scattering golden flecks onto the lawn. "For a while, this place lost its way," I continued, voice catching. "Doors closed, shutters nailed tight, hearts hardened. But love is stubborn. It pushes through cracks, demanding light. And today, because of all of you, this house is open again. Not just for my family, but for our family." My gaze found Sarah near the front row, eyes shining. Found Louise beside her, work-scarred hands folded. Found Ms. Green clutching a cloth-bound book against her chest like a talisman. Each face steadied me. "This kitchen will feed anyone who's hungry," I said, gesturing toward the side window where sunlight glinted off new stainless steel counters. "This reading room will hold stories waiting for new ears. Upstairs, an attic studio will soon buzz with painting classes. And out back," I swallowed, blinking fast, "out back we'll plant something that outlives all of us." A hush settled, deeper than quiet. The kind of stillness that invites eternity in. I cleared my throat, voice rough with gratitude. "This house is for all of us. Thank you, Grandma, for teaching me that a legacy isn't something you inherit, it's something you build. And thank you, every one of you, for helping me start." Applause erupted, not thunderous, but warm, rolling across the lawn like early tide. I exhaled, shoulders loosening. Sarah stepped forward with a pair of garden shears rather than the usual ribbon-cutting scissors. Her idea, symbolic from the first snip. I loved her for that. She handed me the shears. The red satin ribbon fluttered in the breeze between two wrought iron stakes draped in ivy. My fingers tightened around the cool metal handles. I heard my grandmother's voice, bright eyes, "Keep your cuts clean, it lets things grow back straighter," and snipped. The ribbon split with a whisper, ends curling like smiles. Cheers burst from the crowd. The guitarist struck a full chord now, confident, ringing. Children darted forward, chasing confetti that Sarah tossed skyward. In that brief whirlwind of color and sound, the house seemed to breathe, a long, contented exhalation. The tree of new beginnings. We gathered behind the house beneath a sky now brilliant blue. A square of fresh-turned earth waited next to a young red maple, its roots bundled in burlap. Louise held the tree upright. Mia steadied the trunk with delicate hands dusted in green chalk. I stepped into the loose soil, heels sinking, and took the spade Ms. Green offered. As I shoveled earth around the roots, each scoop felt like sealing a vow, to protect, to nourish, to keep doors open even when storms came. When the last of the soil packed firm, Sarah passed me a watering can. I poured slowly. Water seeped into the ground, darkening it, releasing a scent like rain meeting clay. Applause rose again, softer this time, more intimate, like a lullaby hummed over a cradle. I brushed dirt from my palms, patted the trunk once, and stepped back. The maple's leaves flickered crimson in the sunlight, a quiet torch against the sky. Micro-actions rippled around me, Luis rubbing sawdust from his sleeve, Ms. Green wiping a tear with the corner of her clipboard, Sarah exhaling as though she'd carried the weight of those roots herself. And inside my chest, something unknotted, years of tension melting into a gentle warmth I recognized as hope. Evening glow. By dusk, lanterns strung between porch columns cast honeyed light across tired faces and half-empty platters. Laughter lingered like wood smoke. Guitar strings stilled but vibrated faintly in the night air. One by one, guests drifted home, pressing my hands, whispering blessings, promising to return. When the last car rolled away, silence settled, not hollow, but full of after-music. I leaned against the porch railing, legs aching pleasantly, palms still smelling of cedar and soil. Sarah sank beside me, bumping my shoulder with hers. "Look at that," She nodded toward the sapling in the yard. Fireflies bobbed around its leaves, tiny lanterns greeting a new neighbor. We did good, I murmured. We did great, she corrected, grinning. A gust rustled through the maple, leaves murmuring secrets. My gaze drifted to the second-floor window. My father's unopened envelope lay on the old writing desk inside, still waiting. I hadn't decided what to do with it, but tonight its presence felt less like a threat and more like a bridge, fragile perhaps, yet possible. I drew a breath, tasting distant rain on the horizon. There's still work to do, I said softly. Sarah followed my eyes to the lit window. She knew. Tomorrow, she said. The porch light flickered once, steady now, no longer a question, but a steady heartbeat. I curled my fingers around the pendant at my throat, its ruby glint catching lantern glow. Grandma's words echoed, "Plant a seed, watch it rise." Below us, the maple stood tiny yet unbowed, roots burrowing through dark earth, branches reaching for stars not yet visible. Dusk settles around the eaves like lavender smoke. I sit alone on the porch swing, one knee tucked beneath me, the boards creaking a lullaby I memorized as a child. In the yard, the young red maple shivers, each leaf catching the last embers of daylight until the tree glows as if lit from within. Inside, I can still hear distant murmurs. Louise stowing saws, Ms. Green shelving donated books, Mia laughing up the attic stair. This house, once silent with loss, hums like a hive at dusk. I turn Margaret's letter over in my hands, the paper softened by many readings. The envelope bearing Dad's name lies unopened beside me, edges crisp, weight strangely light. One truth at a time, I remind myself. Tonight belongs to the woman who loved me first. I unfold her words. The porch lamp flicks on, washing the page in buttery gold. You are my legacy, Emily. Tears blur the ink, but I blink until the lines settle and whisper them aloud. A vow and a benediction. Fireflies rise from the grass. Tiny lanterns stitching constellations no telescope can chart. In their blinking flight, I see every mile of this journey. Portland rain at my window, archive dust in my lungs, courtroom fluorescence exposing theft, ribbon-cutting applause. All of it funnels into this still moment, quiet yet immense. Gratitude swells, hot and effervescent. I set the letter on my lap, cradle my cheeks, and let a laugh tremble into a sob. The sound is ridiculous and perfect. Footsteps scuff the stairwell. Sarah appears with 2 steaming mugs. "Back up," she says, settling beside me. Chamomile and honey swirl, sweet and steady. "Reading her again?" she asks. It never stops feeling new. Her eyes rest on the unopened envelope. That next? Soon. For now I'm busy watching a miracle grow. I nod toward the yard, lanterns marking the stone path, silhouettes trading recipes in the kitchen window. Victory looks a lot like ordinary goodness. She clinks her mug to mine. Turning hurt into hospitality, is there a better win? Silence falls, comfortable and deep. I square my shoulders against the swing chain. She tucks a stray hair behind my ear. Small gestures, huge echoes. Ms. Green pokes her head out. Locking up. She spots the envelope, offers a knowing nod, disappears with a gentle click. The porch light steadies like a guardian star. I break the seal. Inside, a single sheet. Robert, when you read this, remember the arbor swing you built Emily. She called its green, the color of brave things. Follow her lead. Love doesn't keep score. It keeps doors open. Come home when you're ready. Tears slip warm. She left him a bridge, Sarah murmurs. And I'll leave the door unlocked, I say, pressing the page to my chest. A door creaks inside me, pain easing into possibility. Moonlight crowns the maple. I rise, rest my hand on the rail. I turned betrayal into refuge. I can turn uncertainty into invitation. I speak to the night, to Grandma, to anyone who needs the words. Family isn't just blood. It's whoever lifts you when the world presses you down. Broken pieces can build something beautiful. Sarah grins. Say that on camera tomorrow? Viewers need it. Right. My voice lifts, playful yet earnest. If this story touched you, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment about your own journey. Check out more tales of turning pain into purpose on the channel. We laugh at pitching to crickets, but the call feels right, a final stitch in a quilt of voices. The wind shifts, bringing cedar and distant chimney smoke. I see tomorrow's sun streaming through stained glass transoms, toddlers stacking blocks on rainbow-lit floors. I picture the stove roaring beneath community chili, steam fogging windows. I picture Mia's mural, vines curling around the word belong, unfurling hope in green and gold. A memory flashes. 15-year-old me tucking a Polaroid of Grandma into my pocket before we drove away after her funeral, promising the house I'd come back. I didn't know it would take half my lifetime, but here I am, scars knit, heart wider. The new bulletin board beside the door already overflows. Grief Circle Thursdays, free bike repair, beginner guitar, bring your own hope. Every pushpin is a heartbeat. Sarah nudges me. You're still doing the storytelling keynote, right? Only if you sit front row so I don't faint. I'll bring smelling salts, she laughs. A gust lifts fallen maple leaves into a red-gold whirl. Once pain spiraled like that. Now the leaves dance and settle, part of the landscape. Inside, the grandfather clock chimes 9. Deep, resonant. Each gong feels like a nod from the past. On the final note, I realize peace isn't the silence after storms. It's the music you choose to play while rebuilding. Tonight, that music is soft but unmistakable, promising brighter choruses to come. I slip both letters into my pocket, past and future folded together. Lantern bulbs dim, but the porch lamp burns steady, painting our shadows long across the steps. The maple rustles, whispering applause. Down the lane, a single car slows, headlights sweeping the driveway. The driver steps out, hesitates, familiar shoulders bowed beneath apology. My heart stutters, then steadies. The porch light spills a path straight to the gate. Whether he crosses it tonight or next year, the way is clear. I lift the ruby pendant, letting it spark in the glow. One ember of Grandma's fire passed forward. Then I squeeze Sarah's hand. Ready to turn purpose into possibility? I whisper. We already started, she says, squeezing back. Now we let it grow.